most of the time we're working with mid to larger size, either organizations or businesses, and helping them not just make a podcast, but actually integrate audio as part of their business development and make some really good movements with that.
This podcast encourages and empowers you to create your own unique real story, develop your own unique real statement, and discover your own unique real self. The power is yours. Good afternoon, Jeff Large. Previously, episode 1218 of the 12-Minute Convos podcast. It's been just 2 years, 2 months, 16 days, and 18 hours, give or take a few minutes since we last recorded that conversation. That was then. This is now. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm well and very surprised that you know all that information.
Yeah, it's really easy, you put it into the calculator thing on the website with the calendar of where you were, right? And boom, it spits it out.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's great to be back. Good to hear from you.
I definitely didn't do calendar counting. Could you imagine how crazy that would have been? 1 month,
yes,
2 months.
I don't even know what you're talking about, so it's all good.
Well, it's such a grand opportunity. When we last spoke, podcasting was definitely the thing that connected us, Jeff. You were doing a ton of things with the podcast in terms of your podcast. And then there was another podcast that you were doing as well. And then I remember you said this, hey, I don't like to have too many call to actions on a conversation, especially when it's 12 minutes. The last part are my words. Mm-hmm. But what's happening? I mean, how have things evolved, Jeff?
Yeah, things are great. Do you want to know personal or professional?
Hey, I love personal. I really care more about you than what you do. So let's start with personal, please.
Okay, yeah. Updates since we last chatted. I have moved. So I'm still in the Grand Rapids area, but we got a new home. My family is expanding. My wife is due in March.
Wow. So you had 2 children when we spoke?
Yeah, we have a huge spread. My son is 14, my daughter is 7, and then obviously our new baby is about to be 0. So we're just popping out kids every 7 years.
Well, that's great. Tell me, continue, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, not much else to say yet. It's baby's just incubating, doing its thing. Wife is feeling pretty good, which is nice. And then our kids they're both excited, and it should be interesting. It'll be fun to see how the family dynamic changes a little bit when the next little one is here and present in the world.
That's wonderful. So Jeff Large podcast, right? The Jeff Large podcast. Correct. There's One Stop Shop.
Oh, One Stop Shop has actually been discontinued. So that one, okay. I think it exists somewhere, but we're no longer doing that one. That whole company actually got purchased by another company. And so we've amicably, or whatever that word is, we have parted ways at this point. No ill feelings or anything. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. So the last thing is Come Alive Creative still there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's dig into that.
Come Alive is my agency, my company. And we've been, I think at the time that we last chat, like there was more in the beginnings of it. Come Alive's been around I've been running it for maybe 6.5 years or so. We started off as web dev, and since then, probably 3.5-ish years ago, we kicked over to just podcast production. And so we're looking at really full service or turnkey style solutions for most of the time we're working with mid to larger size, either organizations or businesses, and helping them integrate, not just like make a podcast, but actually integrate audio as part of their business development, as part of their marketing strategy, and make some really good movements with that.
Now, is it business development internally within the team, or is it as a marketing model for others to look into what they're doing?
Are you asking, like, how does it do that? How does it play out in that way?
Yeah, if you're doing either or if you're doing both, when you say you're focusing on the organization as well. So they're doing audio, when you said focusing on audio within the organization as well. Is it that the employees are using it?
Well, it's like most people, when we think of podcasting, it's like, okay, let's do some interviews and we'll record it. And from my standpoint, it's like either we'll edit it and do it ourselves and put it on the web, or maybe we'll hire a company to edit and do it and put it up on the web for us. And then we're going to get so many raging fans, and like it just doesn't necessarily work that way. And so the way that I'm approaching it, opposed to thinking of it as a podcast, for me, it's a means to an end. And so most companies want to maybe improve their top of funnel strategy. They want to get more general awareness around a product or an idea. Perhaps their sales process is weak and they get asked specific questions on a frequent basis. And we could create a podcast that would help. That could be one implementation of it, is that we can build it into the sales process. Perhaps it's internal, like you said. We've had a couple companies we've spoke to now that are doing more internal style stuff. And so perhaps it's a C-level executive who might not have the bandwidth to individually go and talk to each one of their employees, but by releasing even just an internal cast, they're able to teach things like process and culture and things along those lines in a way that scales. And so there's a lot of ways to use podcast. Like, I guess for the most part, we think of podcasts as this thing that we can just listen to either be entertained or informed. And what we've been practicing and continuing to discover is there's a lot more uses for it than most people give it credit for. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's really cool. That is absolutely brilliant. Now, is that podcast going to be available to the general public, or is it something that you keep private to the company that you're working with?
Well, it depends on what they're doing. Like, I know some of them are available. Really, at the end of the day, it depends on the goals. And so if the goal is some of those things that I said at first, like awareness, obviously you want to put that one out to everyone. If the goal of it is to educate your own employees, depending on what you're talking about, it might be like pieces of information that are sensitive to the audience or sensitive to the company itself. And so those that would be more exclusive, kind of behind a wall in some capacity that like only the employees have access to. And so it really just depends on the situation and what the goals are for the client.
I love that idea. I think it's the evolution of podcasting. And there's something that I've been seeing in the podcasting space from conversations, and possibly you can endorse this as a teacher, having a teacher background, but it's really interesting, isn't it? The psychological perspective that goes with getting the podcast, setting the goals around releasing your episodes, speaking with people. There's something there, isn't there, that develops the individual. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of angles you can hit that from, but I mean, to tap back into the teacher in me, for the listener, I was formerly trained as a teacher. If you didn't hear the last episode I was on, and people just learn differently. We all, whether we prefer conversation, whether we prefer writing, visuals, like infographics and things, it could be audio. There's a lot of different ways that we learn. And so anytime from a consumption standpoint that we can promote an idea over different mediums, that can be really, really helpful. Or even for those of us creating them, and if you're exploring an idea or whatever it might be, to be able to work through that in a more intimate way and have to plan and have to do these things, or just through conversations like this, like there's a lot you can learn. So I absolutely agree with that.
There's a great ability that you have. I'm not sure if it's developed over time, because you spoke about being a rebel when you were younger, right?
Yeah.
But it seems as though you're able to get out of your own head and look at things, observe the different angles that it may need to be accessed from, and then bring it back in and share it in a format that helps others. Is it the children that help with that, or is it just you and your ability to listen?
Probably a bit of everything. I think it started with me being a teacher just because I was teaching middle school at the time, and it's definitely they're a special special kind of breed in order to figure out with a person who barely understands themselves to figure out how to get them like from point A to point B within a course structure. And so it takes a lot of, like you said, listening and paying attention and testing and things. And so honestly, that helped me a ton as I do this now in business, where it's very similar in a different way, if that makes sense, where businesses have these goals and these objectives they want to complete and they want to do, but they don't necessarily know the best means of getting there. And so that's a huge piece of my job of how can my team and I figure out how to get you and your business from point A to point B using something like a medium like audio. And it's challenging, but it's really fun. And I think, like you said, just being able to be objective, it's necessary. Like, it's really easy to want to do things that are just good for me or good for our team, but it's not necessarily good for the client. And so trying to put other people first as you make these decisions, and trying to look out for other people's interests, especially when it's a field that they might not understand or an industry that they're not 100% familiar with. I think as experts in our own right, we all have an obligation to just take care of the other. Like if we're the ones in the know, we need to be looking out for the other people.
There's a voice, right? There's a voice that we as humans, we're hearing, right? That tells us we should do something. Or even when you hear that voice that says, yeah, you should do this, Jeff, there's another voice that says, no, you shouldn't do this. How do you define that voice? And how do you ensure that you're listening to the right voice?
That's a bigger question than a 12-minute conversation, I think. But if I had to shorten it up, I mean, for me personally, I'm a person of faith. I have a Catholic background that I came into later in life. I grew up kind of whatever, and then around my high school years, started to actually get into just a more of a Christian faith, and then it was post that more when I was around in college, began researching Catholicism for a long time, and so that's my personal background. But that being said, I think just in general, whatever kind of background you have, it can boil it down into simple things like the golden rule, or just would I want to be treated that way in this situation, or just, I mean, when you take a minute and you respect the personhood of another or the dignity of another, people do it in different ways. I mean, it could be like you pretend that they're one of your kids, or you pretend that the other person is like your parent or something. I mean, we all have different ways that we'll deal with it or cope with it or kind of handle it. But I mean, if we just treat one another with respect, I don't know how we can't get to those conclusions.
I love that. I immediately saw you with Tigger on the bike, right? Just caring for Tigger, right?
Way back in the day.
Yeah, he's important, right? And as you shared in that earliest childhood memory on our previous conversation, carrying around Tigger. But yeah, the caring part, the love, right? You did say that as well when we spoke, right? Love well, love well. Well, my friend, this has been a grand opportunity. I can go on with you forever and ever, but hey, it's a 12-minute convo, right? How would that go for branding? But you are so amazing, and it is both inspirational and motivational to know that you've not given up. And of course, you're bearing fruit, right?
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully here.
So I appreciate that. In closing, Jeff, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
The only thing would be, if you are interested in anything I have to say, I have my own personal podcast where I also get to interview really amazing people. Mine's a little longer than 12 minutes, but you can check that out at jefflarge.com. So just like big or huge, jefflarge.com.
Again, amazing audience. This guy is amazing. For our Trinities who listen, he large in the house. Jeff, thank you for being on What is Inspired by 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones. This podcast is produced by Pod Edits. Visit podedits.com for professional podcast publishing.